All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. And this week we're going to jump right into our feature interview. It is with, we're glad to welcome the newly elected chairman of the Missouri Republican Party, John Hancock.
Hi, Scott. Good to be with you.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Let me just start with a question that people want to know. At any time, were you part of a whispering campaign where you said anti-Semitic statements about Tom Schweitzer?
I was not, and I gave a statement earlier last week that I outlined the entire history of all of these things. And there was a campaign against me that included telling people that I was anti-Semitic and I'd made anti-Semitic statements and so forth. It was not true then, it's not true now, and there's never been any evidence because I didn't do it.
The timeline from, I think, maybe Jefferson City perspective was there was a conversation you had when people heard you were running for chair. You spoke with Tom Schweitzer, maybe at the encouragement of Senator Danforth, in which you told him you would be neutral as party chair.
Right.
But you'd probably vote for Catherine, who's been a friend of yours for a long time. Why'd you tell Tom that?
Well, I told Tom in our conversation that I was running for chairman. He knew that I had worked for Catherine Hanaway earlier that year in 2014, and I told him I had. But I said as party chairman, I would be neutral in the governor's race, and the party would be neutral in the governor's race. That my job was to say good things about Republicans and bad things about Democrats. And I told him that if I were voting, you know, I had a preference, I would vote for Catherine Hanaway. I told him that just because I was honest with him. And but I think you'll see that throughout the entire course of my campaign for chairman, every opportunity I had to speak on the governor's race, I said very good things about Tom Schweitzer and
in our
Catherine
interview
Hanaway.
after your election, you were very complimentary of the state auditor.
Right.
There seems to be a little bit of a pattern here where maybe being extra honest has came back and to bite you. You put out a statement early on where you said, I may have said these things. And as time went by and no one came forward,
Right.
that was sort of what your opponents have used against you. Why did you say that statement? And can you remember anyone in particular that you said that to?
No, in fact, that's what I said. I said I have no specific recollection of ever discussing Tom's religion with anybody. I can't remember a time that I had done that. But, you know, for 4 years I thought he was Jewish. And so it's possible I could have said that Tom was Jewish to somebody. And I'm just being honest.
It seems a little odd that some folks in the Republican Party think that saying someone's Jewish would hurt you within the Republican Party. That's not what I've seen. I've not seen that there's a major anti-Semitism issue inside the Republican Party.
Not at all. In fact, the Republican Party contains some of the strongest supporters of Israel that you're going to find anywhere in this country. And there is no strain of anti-Semitism in the Republican Party, as some would have us believe. It just simply isn't true.
So as time went on, the Missouri Times wrote a story about the only name I'd heard that had been in connection with this, a businessman in Kansas City, who also thought Tom was Jewish. That came and went. Then Trish Vincent stepped up a few days later. Trish is widely respected inside the Republican Party, got a stellar resume, recounting a conversation that you had. She said that in that conversation, you told her that you had been telling people Tom was Jewish, but you had stopped.
Right.
What you said that's not the way that went.
No.
How did the conversation go?
I told her the same thing I told Senator Danforth, which was the same thing I told Tom Schweitzer, which is the same thing that I told Trish Vincent, which is the same thing I told the Post-Dispatch, the Associated Press, and Missouri Times, and in my statement yesterday, and to the state committee, that I don't remember ever telling anyone that Tom Schweitzer was Jewish, but that it was possible that I could have. That was because that's the truth. And Trish is misremembering or misunderstanding that conversation. And what basically...
Trish is no supporter of yours in this endeavor, right?
And she would have us believe that there was a whisper campaign, that I conducted the whisper campaign, and that the only person in the world that I would admit that I had a whisper campaign was to Tom Schweitzer's chief of staff. That just doesn't make sense.
As far as this goes, I think some of your associates in the political world know this could have been any number of people, any number of issues, and I think there's been some sympathy for you in this. And people will still ask the question, is there anyone that you believe will come forward and say, John Hancock said this to me? He said an anti-Semitic comment to me.
There's nobody that's going to come forward and say I said an anti-Semitic comment, because I've never done that.
Last thing, in Jeff City, there were 3 very respected senators, Senator Romine, Parson, and Pierce, 3 of the most respected senators in the Republican caucus, came forward and didn't so much say you were anti-Semitic, but said that you should leave the chairmanship of the party. What would you say to those senators?
I would say that if they ever find themselves accused of false allegations or the subject of rumors and untruths said about them, if they ever find themselves in that position, as I have found myself, I'll be the first one there to defend them. That's what I'll say to them.
The last question. You've been put in a extremely challenging position. 6 months from now, obviously there's a man that's dead. Obviously had trouble. I think everybody's agreed to that, but a state leader's dead. You've been brought into it maybe against your own will with a series of things no one could predict. What would you like to see the last word on this be?
Well, I think I've said the last word. The whisper campaign didn't happen. And I think, the tragedy that happened is that a man has killed himself. He's left a wife and 2 children. My heart aches for that family. And, it is wrong to inject politics into a tragedy like this. I don't have any intention of talking about this. This is behind us, and we need to move forward.
With that being the case, looking forward to running the party. I think that one of the questions, there's been some speculation, maybe some folks, some rivals that you had previously saw this as a way to restart that race. Will you stay as party chairman through the 2016 elections?
That is my intention. I want to run the party. This is the most important election in our lifetimes coming up in 2016. And we have an opportunity to take back the White House. And if we don't take back the White House in 2016, I fear for this country. I believe this country is in a major world of hurt. And if we don't win the White House back in November of 16, I'm afraid we're going to continue this slide into socialism that we have seen, and it's scary, dangerous.
You have a role to play in making that come to pass. As chairman of the party, when you were running, you made a very persuasive comment, I think, that was part of your landslide victory. If the party we can't be the party of fiscal responsibility if we can't manage our own finances. You inherited a party racked with debt,
yep.
Very small staff, accomplishing very little. Can you raise the money to turn that around with this controversy, even though it may be behind you? Can you raise the money to start turning that around?
Well, we'll see. I believe I can, and I believe that's going to start happening. I have been unable to do anything for the last couple of weeks out of respect for what had happened. But yeah, I think we're going to be able to raise the money.
When does that start? When does the forward progress begin?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Right here first. So when you turn this around and you do start to come out of the hole, that not only with this controversy, I do think people skip over the fact that you inherited a party that's broke.
Right.
Most people have more money in their pocket than the Missouri Republican Party does.
My
in the bank.
daughter has more money, and she works at Emos, and she's in better shape than the Missouri Republican Party right now.
So let's say you start turning that around. What do you do as a party to facilitate those victories in 2016?
Well, we've got to get a grassroots program put together and get out the vote. We have been stagnated in the old world of landline telephone voter contact, and that just doesn't work anymore. And we have, I think, a pretty revolutionary plan to mobilize and modernize our grassroots, letting people create their own precincts. People they know. It's a virtual precinct, and so our volunteers, rather than being given a list of names to go talk to, they create the list of names that they're going to work in the election day. And if we can get our county parties and the pachyderm clubs and the Republican Federated Women all engaged and the college Republicans all engaged in this process, we will have the largest get out the vote effort that the Republican Party has ever seen.
You look at with the way the laws are now, it generally behooves interest to give to the candidates. There's no limits.
Right.
Don't those candidates build their own data And how do you get them to share that data with the party?
Well, you know, it's challenging, and but most campaigns spend most of their money on advertising on your show.
Well, your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, and that's just the truth. And so the grassroots work, every campaign says they're going to do it, and they pay lip service to it. Some do a good job, but most may perhaps do not. It really is the party apparatus that is singularly focused on building that ground effort that makes a 2 or 3 or 4 point difference on election day for the top of the ticket.
In Missouri, I would say a small part of the Democrats' statewide dominance has been that data machine. They have a better voter turn. I think that's pretty well established. Maybe not in the state legislative races, but statewide, they seem to have a better model. Can you compete with that model and surpass it?
Oh yeah, their model isn't that. What we're competing with is the Obama construction, and
successful construction.
Very successful construction, and we borrowed some ideas from Obama for America and from different state party organizations to put our infrastructure in place. Yes, we'll compete with the Democrats.
Looking forward, 2016, you work not only in Missouri, you've worked all over the country. What is the national mood amongst conservatives? Who is a front runner for the nomination, and who would help Missouri the best?
Well, you know, I think we've got a lot of really good candidates running for president, and I think there's any number of them that can beat Hillary Clinton. And I think Hillary Clinton, if that's what the Democrats come up with, then I think it's going to be a very good year for us.
What's the type of presidential candidate that helps carry a Kurt Schaefer over, an Eric Schmidt over the top in 2016? What's the type of presidential nominee on the Republican side that would help them the most?
Well, I think somebody that inspires people, and we need a candidate that is that people flock to. It's not enough to be against Hillary Clinton. That may be enough to win the White House. But in terms of inspiring our people, I think we need a candidate that speaks to the future, speaks to hope, and I think there are a number of folks in the field that will do that.
You've ran statewide before. Your experience running statewide help you facilitate some of that victory?
Oh, I think it's helpful that I've been a candidate.
You've been around the track. You know what it's like to do it.
I think it's helpful. I can understand candidates, what they're going through. I understand what candidates' spouses go through, which is a very overlooked aspect of a campaign. It's tough on the spouse, and so I think that experience is helpful.
John Hancock, I want to thank you for ending your week on this week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Scott.
And we'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
And welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. This week in our Opinion Maker panel, we're thrilled to have the debut of Jeff Mazur, the head of AFSCME here in Missouri, and a phenomenal, is it Twitter follower?
And former Missouri Times guest columnist.
Former Missouri Times guest columnist, probably one of the best ones we've ever had with Graham Harrell. We have Representative Justin Hill from St. Charles County, a Republican, and Schweitzer, public eye here out of St. Louis. And making his opinion panel debut, former senator, the baritone voice that scared more fear into senators than anybody else in state history, Jason Crowell.
Thanks, Scott.
Jason, we'll start with you. You saw the interview with John Hancock. What'd you think?
I think I believe him. I believe him. I've known John over a decade. I was elected when I was 28 years old. He was one of those guys that kind of put his arm around me. I haven't seen any evidence that would lead me to believe that he's not telling the truth.
Are we moving past saying that he was and is anti-Semitic to will he stay on? Do you believe he stays on, and can he raise the money to do so?
If anyone can, John can. The Republican Party was much better run when I first got elected, and he was at the helm at that time. It's challenging because of the way limits are. If you look at the Democratic Party, the largest donors are Claire McCaskill and Chris Koster.
Makes sense.
Individuals are funding the party. So if Republican candidates, and once we get our slate of statewide candidates and kind of work through those issues, that the Democratic Party has a tremendous advantage over the Republican Party right now with no primaries and everything else. Yeah, I think John can do it.
Jeff Mazur, I could see the smart strategists have set back in the Democrat Party and let the Republicans complete their circular firing squad. But when it's over, when do you step forward and what do you do with this?
Listen, when your enemies are in a fight, don't interrupt, as you know. But just watching the interview, do I think that John Hancock is an anti-Semite? No, not at all. Do I think that John Hancock is the sort of person who might drop a hint to someone he suspects is an anti-Semite if it thinks it gives him an edge or an advantage? I think that's a much harder question. And so it's interesting to hear what he has to say today. Do I know how this plays out over the course of the next year, year and a half in the Missouri Republican Party? I don't. But I think that in some ways talking about the John Hancock issue puts the cart before the horse. If we have a major political party in the state in which some people at least think Jew bashing is an effective means of succeeding in a primary, then I think there's some deeper, darker problems that need to be grappled with than who is the party chair.
Interesting. And as a supporter, I assume, of Jason Kander, who is Jewish, and obviously there's a lot of support he could rally with this. Where does this begin to make a difference in that U.S. Senate race?
I'm not sure where it makes a difference in the U.S. Senate race. I think we'll see how this makes a difference for Democrats in general, whether or not this helps us, hurts us, whether or not Hancock staying helps, hurts. It's definitely going to be one of those things we find out as time goes on. I think what we're realizing right now is that when you're hateful, you're going to get called out for it. And that's happening with this issue, that's happening with other issues. We have right now
Sitting right there, though, did you believe John Hancock? You're a person that works in politics. After he was done, what is your opinion of John Hancock? I
really do agree a lot with Jeff. You know, people in politics, it's a messy game, and people will say things that they think will give them an edge. Whether or not he said it in a way that was meant to be hateful, that's a good question. Whether or not it was just said, I think what we have now is we have a lot of people, John Hancock, a chief of staff, an editorial writer, who are all trying to figure out, could I have done something differently? And are trying to express themselves and figure out, what did I say wrong? What could I have said differently? And what do I have to say now to make sure that my conscience is cleared? So sure. That's what's happening.
Justin Hill, some of your colleagues stepped forward this week and said John should leave, whether it was because of he's anti-Semitic or whatever the reason was he should leave the chairmanship of the party. You did not join them. After seeing this interview and seeing what happened this week in Jeff City, what's your take?
My take is, we elect state committeemen and women to take charge of the state party. And, I was elected to make law. So I say we look to our state committeemen and women to make that decision.
And they seem to be backing John at this point.
Correct.
Moving on from this issue onto an equally delicate issue, and this week in Ferguson is back in the news. There were protests after the Department of Justice report. 2 cops were shot. Where does this end? What needs to happen to make the protesters feel like they've got something good to move forward with? And where does the protesting end? And how do you stop cops from getting shot up there? I mean, where do you?
There are 2 issues, 2 solution issues at hand. One is short-term solutions. What can we do right now, today, to make the situation better for everyone? Not protesters, not cops, but everyone, because we all have a stake in this. And then there are long-term solutions, which you're seeing. I mean, there's changes happening in the municipal court system. There's changes happening with all over the place. A lot of people are trying to do the right thing. In the city of St. Louis, Mayor Slay has come forward with a lot of really innovative things to address issues, and not in a way that panders, which I personally have a problem with. I don't think saying the cops are always good and the protesters are always good, either way or either bad, is going to lead us in the wrong direction. So I think a way that comes with smart, constructive, forward-thinking policy, short-term and long-term, is our best solution.
Jason Crowell, from a state perspective, of the events you're seeing, what could the state do in this situation?
Not much. I don't blame Governor Nixon. He was in a terrible situation. I don't blame any of our real state leaders. I do agree with the movement of reforming our municipalities. A lot of this treatment, if you will, is because the police force has been used as tax collectors. And I think that mindset has to change, and that is what I like seeing policymakers address, because it's not really a Ferguson issue. We have that in outstate Missouri and in southeast Missouri. When police officers believe they are revenue collectors, it's a different way than serve and protect. And we've got to get rid of that pressure with state laws.
Representative Hill, seeing these events, you have a background in law enforcement. What can the state do on either end to help keep the cops and the firefighters safe, and to what could be done to address some of the issues the protesters raise?
Well, I think we had a breakdown in possibly community-oriented policing. The state, like the former senator said, the state really can't do much. It's a community effort. Maybe the media can also, help out in that fact that allow the community to, heal. Number one.
Speaking of the media, there were two reports that came out by the Department of Justice. One basically saying that Darren Wilson broke no federal law and kind of debunking some of the theories that have been put out. Two was talking about the Ferguson Police Department, some of the issues that have been raised that, yes, the cops clearly in some instances are turning into fundraisers. The media really didn't cover the part about Darren Wilson very much. It covered the other ones. Is that part of what you're talking about?
Yes. Yes, it was decided long ago. I mean, Darren Wilson was, justified.
Jeff Mazur, there was two narratives that came out. I heard last night on cable, all across the spectrum, the Department of Justice was supposed to be the fair arbiter that would come in here and say, and find fact. I heard a lot of the protesters just don't believe the Department of Justice now. They've turned into another group they don't believe. How do you sit down and reason and find a way forward?
Well, let me first say I think that we ought to be really cautious as 5 white Missourians sitting around this table and holding forth and deciding how things need to happen in Ferguson. I think that there's a lot to suggest that that's part of the reason we got into the issue we're in Ferguson in the first place. But to answer your specific question, I think it's just reflective of the mistrust people have developed in all levels of government for a lot of reasons. I don't think it can be specifically traced to this issue, though certainly some of the angst is related to the idea that law enforcement is an arm of the law and Department of Justice is an arm of the law, and people don't feel as though they've gotten good treatment from the law in general. And so I think people don't make a distinction between Eric Holder and the Department of Justice and the St. Louis County Police and the Ferguson cop who's on the beat.
If they don't make a distinction, who does find facts? Or you have to have facts to make policy. And a lot of the folks that are elected in Missouri are white males. How do you sit and find facts to move forward? I mean, if you're serious about a solution, you have to look at the facts.
Sure. We sit and we see people in Jefferson City that use their own unique set of facts every day to justify their own unique policy positions. So I think this issue is no different. I think it's problematic because it does, as Ann said, affect everyone, regardless if we live in Ferguson or Cape Girardeau or anywhere else. So I think we have a long ways to go to build trust in our institutions, including the police, including the state government, including the federal government. And I think if we can go down that road, then people will be more likely to accept and use the facts that are given to them in order to make decisions about how to move forward.
Speaking of an issue that's been demagogued quite a bit in every state, but Missouri too, Justin Hill, there was a measure that moved out of committee this week about medical marijuana usage in Missouri. Obviously to some folks, extremely complex, to some folks, extremely simple. What's the climate in Jeff City on this issue, and will it pass?
It's a big bill. I don't know that the whole legislature is behind this bill, but I think it's something we do need to address.
Jeff Mazur, if someone can get prescribed OxyContin for their pain or some of the very, very harsh narcotics, why can't they be prescribed medical marijuana?
It's absurd. I sat in the Emerging Issues Committee, Chair Harr's committee, this week and watched as they took a vote on this measure there. And I thought it was telling that the vote ultimately was 10-1. You had one person who I'll not name in that committee who very clearly was redolent of the kind of reefer madness approach to marijuana. It was very clear that we had a whole group of people, the majority of whom were ready to move forward and do something forward-looking on this issue for the very reasons you state. Yet there was 10% of that group who who aren't there and who an awful lot of time was spent on trying to move them in the right direction. And I think that's indicative of the way we do a lot of politics in this state. We've got a vocal 8 or 10% who are trying to hang on to a distant past that doesn't exist anymore. And we spend an awful lot of time trying to pacify and get those folks on board. I think this issue is no different.
Jason Crowell, this would have been a tough issue in the Senate to pass. for maybe not head reasons, but heart reasons. Explain the dynamic of being a person in the Republican politics. It's a tough bill to vote for.
Yeah, it's a tough bill to vote for, but I do think, last year, Eric Schmidt took a real step forward by making the connection to his son and the need for new legislation to allow new emerging treatments. I think if we keep it focused on the science, we're going to get a better result. And I don't want to rush out to be a Colorado where you have a head shop set up every 13 blocks, it seems like, out there. And I don't want this to be about legalizing something because, we want the money in government off of the tax revenues. If we can look at the issue from the lens of sort of how Eric Schmidt dealt with this on his son's story and how authorizing new medical treatments, I think it's a better way in which to analyze it.
I'll ask you the tough question. If you're in the Missouri Senate this session, do you vote for this bill?
It's something I would have to study up more on. I don't think it's something that'll pass this year. I think it's going to take more understanding. It's going to take the communities to move along as well. This is going to be more of a bottom-up issue, if you will, throughout the Republican Party, not a top-down issue.
And your communications, how do you communicate to a suburban voter that this is not going to bring reefer madness?
It's a good question. I agree that it's absurd we don't have this yet. I do agree that science is probably the best approach to pushing it through with what it can do medically for the community. I am of the belief that eventually it will be legal, and if we're going to take this route to get there, then that's the route Missouri is going to take.
You mean full legal marijuana?
I think so. I think we're moving towards that. I think there's way too much time in our court systems and in spending on an issue that's so small.
Well, there's the conservative argument of
these giant issues.
Why do you want more laws to govern what people do with their own free time and their own free will?
So I agree with that. Why are we trying to put more laws on this? Like, I'm the Democrat at this table, right? Like, should I be the one asking that question? No, I do think that it just needs to be legal. That's my short answer, I guess.
2 quick predictions. Does Hancock stay as party chair through 16?
Yes.
And?
If he can get a lot of money in right now, fundraise a lot, yes.
Senator, does he stay?
Absolutely.
Justin Hill?
Absolutely.
Does medical marijuana pass? Justin Hill?
No.
No.
I hope so.
Hope so.
Yes.
I will take just view. I think the head is conquering the heart slowly.
Pun intended.
But it is conquering the heart in Jefferson City just a little bit. And that's where we'll leave it for this week in Missouri Politics. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.